Premier Stephen Miles has ditched tradition of taking a chauffeur-driven car to Government House to call the election. Instead, he's joined commuters on a public bus, hoping to secure support for a fourth-term Labor government. Opposition leader David Crisafulli, meanwhile, was in the regions, promising more funds to fight crime. In a moment, we will hear from Mr Miles and Mr Crisafulli. But first, let's take a look at what was an unconventional start to the campaign.
Waiting at a bus stop like any other passenger, but the folder marked confidential shows this was no ordinary commute.
Well, I thought it was probably the first time a Premier had caught the bus to Government House to dissolve the Parliament and issue the writs.
It was a deliberate move to highlight the 50-cent public transport fares his government has introduced, now backed by the LNP.
This election is all about who do you trust most to tackle the cost of living and to take our state forward.
Not a chauffeur-driven limousine in sight, instead a brisk walk to Government House, emerging a short time later to declare the campaign officially underway.
I have a vision for our state's future.
Make no mistake, the battle lines for this election have been drawn.
Nearly 400 kilometres north in Bundaberg, the state's most marginal seat.
I'm standing in a city that was decided by 9 votes.
The man who wants to be Premier, determined to drive home his pitch.
Youth crime, health, housing, cost of living.
You know, everyone's struggling. Bills, food, everything's going up.
I think just more relief for people in general.
Definitely crime, yeah.
Touring a car and truck rental business smashed and burnt.
That vehicle's $72,000 to replace.
David Crisafulli announced another $40 million in grants for small business and councils to upgrade security. He also defended the fact he lives in Brisbane while representing the seat of Broadwater on the Gold Coast.
We've taken a conscious decision as a family for me to spend more time with my kids who are both being educated in Brisbane.
Stephen Miles was on the defensive too, after seemingly leaving the door open to forming a minority government.
We won't be doing any deals, but I'm not ruling out testing our numbers on the floor.
His attention was on Townsville, an afternoon stopover where local issues are key. The north is proving crucial territory. Labor holds 3 seats here in Townsville. Each is on a margin of below 4% and considered must-holds. It's where Stephen Miles has zeroed in on the city's beleaguered mayor, his government issuing a show cause notice as a final act this morning before Parliament was dissolved. Troy Thompson has been under a corruption watchdog investigation since May, accused of misleading the public over his military, business and education credentials. Labor wants him suspended for a year.
These are very specific powers under the Local Government Act, and I do not take those powers lightly.
Given 3 weeks to respond, Mr Thompson has already hit back, describing the move as a political hit job and demanding any action to be deferred until after the caretaker period. Kate McKenna, ABC News, Mackay.
Well, the Premier is in Mackay this evening. Mr Miles, thanks for your time. Labor's had nearly 10 years in office. Why should Queenslanders give you another 4?
G'day Jess, thanks for having me on. This election really is about who's best placed, who you trust most to tackle the cost of living and to deliver a plan for our state's future. And I've tried these last 10 months to set out on both of those fronts. So I'm running on my record on cost of living and on my plan for our state's future. And that's what I'll be talking about between now and October 26.
Do you concede there is a mood for change in Queensland though?
Look, every election is hard and I know that I'm the underdog in this race, but every Queensland election I've been part of before has been hard too, and I know the LNP think they might win this one easily, but I've got news for them. Every election is hard and this one will be closer than people think.
You've been campaigning hard on cost of living. Will you be promising any further relief in these next 4 weeks?
Yes.
Such as?
Well, you'll have to wait and see, Jess, but I think what Queenslanders have seen from me is that I move quickly and aim to do a lot in a short period of time. So I've got just under 4 weeks and there'll be a lot more plans for me to outline to them, going to what the key issues that I've heard from Queenslanders are, and as I've said, cost of living is the big one. I think I've got runs on the board there, but there is much more to do.
If Labor loses, as the opinion polls are suggesting, will you stay on as opposition leader?
Look, I'm not getting into what might happen. You know, we have to wait and see what does happen with the election and make decisions from there. My goal between now and then is to do as much as I possibly can to convince Queenslanders to give me a term as Premier in my own right. I think I've spent the last 10 months showing Queenslanders what I would be like, but there's only so much you can do without a mandate in your own right, and that's what this election would give me.
Stephen Miles, thank you. Let's go to the LNP leader, David Crisafulli, who's ending his day in Springwood, south of Brisbane. Mr Crisafulli, appreciate you speaking with us. Have you got this election in the bag?
Far from it, Jess. History shows we are well and truly the underdog, and of the last 12 general elections since the mid-80s, the Labor Party have won 11. So you can forgive us for working harder and being more disciplined, because we have the weight of history against us, but we are unified, we are focused, we are hungry to serve, and the state really does need a fresh start, and we are determined to give Queenslanders the opportunity to vote for change.
The opinion polls for months, though, have all been pointing to an LNP victory. Are they wrong?
They're not the numbers that drive us, Jess, and they never have been, and they can't be. We've got ambulance ramping at 45%, the highest ever recorded across the country. We've got more people on the social housing waiting list than we've ever had. Electricity prices have risen by 19.9%, 3 times the national average. And we've got 389,657 victims in Queensland. And I'm standing right now in a coffee shop with one of those victims, Chris, and I was here a few days ago. He'd been broken into for a 4th time. The last time he had seen an offender carrying a machete. And last night, his neighbouring business got broken into. It is a youth crime crisis, and we have put forward solutions, and it's at all ends of the spectrum, from early intervention to rehabilitation to the laws that we need, and Queenslanders can vote for change in less than a month.
We've repeatedly heard Labor say the LNP means cuts, so let's get a clear answer. Will there be any cuts to frontline services under a government you lead?
We want to strengthen frontline services, Jess, so that's an absurd assertion from the Labor Party, and they know it's not true. And we have listened and we have focused, and I've spoken about a world-class public service and what that looks like. And I want to see our public service in Queensland be able to be part of the delivery of world-class services. And at the moment there is an obsession with the external consultancies. I want public servants to feel empowered. I want doctors and nurses to be back in charge of hospitals. I want to have more police on the front line and give them the laws to do their job. So you are going to see a scare campaign against all manner of things from the Labor Party. The more they become a campaign about fear, the more I will choose hope. And I want Queenslanders to know that this state deserves a fresh start.
All right, Mr Crisafulli, we're out of time.
To vote for it.
Thank you so much. So what would it take for a change of government in Queensland? That will depend on how many seats change hands. Politics is a numbers game, and never more so than during an election, because whoever wins the most seats gets to govern the state and take up residence in the Tower of Power. So let's do the numbers. Queensland's Parliament has 93 seats. Right now, Labor has 51, the LNP 35. Katter's Australian Party has 4, the Greens 2, and there's 1 independent. But the most important number this election is 47. That's how many seats a party needs to win to govern in its own right, without having to negotiate with any minor parties or independents. So if you do the maths, Labor has a bit of a buffer. It could lose 4 seats and still secure a 4th term in office, allowing Stephen Miles to continue on as Premier. On the other side, the LNP would need to pick up an extra 12 seats to win a majority, booting Labor off the government benches and making David Crisafulli the first LNP Premier since Campbell Newman. That might sound like a big ask, but in a state like Queensland that's famous for its landslide victories and defeats, it has been done before.